But what do you make of her flip-flopping? My issue with her is her instincts seem to be always on the wrong side. She seems to take a position that is contrary to what you would expect someone in the Liberal Party to have before then being persuaded through, I don't know, focus groups or colleagues to come to a different position.
Well, we can only hope that she's well advised to ignore some of those poorer instincts that she has shown in the past. But the job in front of Sussan Ley is quite massive. A significant reason why the Liberal Party lost 2 weeks ago is because they're unaware or unable to show what their values are. And if you don't know what your values are, you're unable to drive good policies because ultimately your policies are driven by what your values are. Sussan Ley will have to show the Liberal Party's values and be able to show how they are aligned with the views of mainstream Australians. And Matt Canavan has really led the way on this with his challenge for the leadership of the Nats, with his overtly being against net zero.
Absolutely.
The vast majority of Australians, IPA polling has shown over the entire tenure of the Albanese government that they want energy affordability and energy reliability more than they want net zero or renewables. But we have been unable to see an opposition thus far present that to the Australian people. And that's just one area of policy that Sussan Ley has to address, let alone the vast areas of cost of living issues facing the electorate.
Absolutely, and that's the argument I was making throughout Prue, that they could have had an election that was a referendum on energy policy. It's a huge issue for cost of living, and they could have said we are prioritising cost and reliability. Labor's prioritising emission cuts, and given the Australian people a choice. I think they would have had a much better campaign if they had at least that big point of differentiation. They did have nuclear, but doesn't kick in till the 2030s, and they were too scared to even talk about it. Now, the memes have started. This one mocks Sussan Ley's belief in numerology, the adding of an extra S to her first name. So, yeah, now we've got the first decision to add an extra B. Quite droll, I've got to say. But are Labor going to be ruthless in going after her for some of her issues in the past? She had the expenses scandal. That's why she was demoted previously. It is now, 8 years ago. But are they going to dig that up to try to damage her?
I think they'll resort, as they always do, to whatever dirty play they can. Now, whether, as I referred earlier, whether they're going to be as thuggish and bullying in Parliament with her directly will be an interesting optic, and it could be difficult for them to navigate. But they will go after her. You can bet on it. This is the only kind of politics that Labor knows, to dig up the dirt, to in any way they can to disrespect someone. They'll ridicule her. You can imagine what they're going to pile on, and they'll probably use some of their mean girls to do it so that the men aren't accused of being, bullies. But it's okay for women to bully others, apparently.
Well, this is the thing. I think it's naive to think they're going to go easy on her because of her gender, because, they've got plenty of female MPs, plenty of female ministers who can do that job, and they're not going to be accused of sexism or misogyny. And we saw how they targeted other senior Conservative women in the past. Now, let's talk about the rental crisis. Leading property developer Tim Gurner has said the pain for renters is not going to be over anytime soon. He is predicting the housing crisis will last for at least another 15 years as the nation's housing supply struggles to meet demand. Rents have soared nearly 40% over the last 6 years. Victoria is struggling, Saxon under heavy taxes and regulations. And Tim Gurner also had this to say about Victoria. This was last year. He said, the strong consensus is in other states that Victoria is broke, it's cold, and your property prices don't go up. Well, he's right. We've seen Melbourne prices go backwards, stagnate, whilst other cities, Brisbane, Perth, Sydney, were going up. But what about the shortage of property and what that means for renters? I would argue also making it really unattractive for landlords to invest in property is also adding to the problem.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, there are far too many taxes, there are far too many zoning laws, and it makes it harder to increase the supply of homes. But the biggest burden on renters regarding housing and rentals is immigration, and it's undeniable. Even though there's supposedly a cap on international student numbers continue to rise, immigration continues to rise, and the government have no plan to cap immigration or simply just to reduce it to allow our housing supply and other critical infrastructure to catch up. Australians support immigration because, you know, we're an immigrant country, but immigration is only a good idea for Australia and for Australians when it is planned for, has the consent for the community, and we have adequate housing to house people. And that's just simply not the case.
It's not. And again, this was another failure of the Liberal Party, Prue. They didn't prosecute the case. They didn't explain that Labor were bringing in record numbers, 500,000 a year, and the impact of that is being felt everywhere, including housing.
That's right. Well, they didn't prosecute anything very well, did they? I don't know where they were. They were out to lunch.
No.
Something happened. But when you look that Albanese's pledging to build 1.9 million homes, new homes, by 2029, he's going to be at close to 500,000 short. We all know it's fantasy. He was in denial about the problems he's created, not just through immigration, and he's in denial about that because he wants to keep doing it. But of course, he's in denial about building costs as well. We have the CFMEU and other union thugs imposing so much more money on developers. Why would anyone want to build if they can't make a profit? So we've got that. We've got the planning laws that are all tied up in red and green tape. The whole thing is a disaster, and it's only going to get worse. And Labor has no answers.
And I can tell you here in Victoria, we had some figures in the Herald Sun last year about, I think, 1 in 4 landlords selling their property because of land tax, because of all the extraordinary increases in regulation and the changes that boost renters' rights and really diminish the rights of property owners. So why put your money into that when you can go and buy, I don't know, shares? A lot simpler. Now to another clash within the leftist ranks. The chair of Victoria's truth-telling body, the Yoorrook Justice Commission, has hit out at Premier Jacinta Allen's tougher bail laws because they won't help with Indigenous reconciliations. She said there will be collateral damage. Eleanor Burke also implied that the laws put the Victorian government's apologies to the Aboriginal people into question, saying that the Victorian government's apologies were important. They are important, historic even, but without action, what do they actually mean? Saxon, this is a very interesting little dispute. The argument is made here that the bail laws that were in place, that so many in the community are dead set against and say are inadequate, the argument is made, well, they were made because of a lot of the activism from the Indigenous community, and now they're being abandoned.
Well, this comes down to 2 issues. One, the truth-telling and whole treaty issue was defeated by the Australian people when they voted against the Voice. The Voice was only step 1 in the Uluru Statement of the Heart, and if you fail at step 1, you can't go around implementing step 2 and step 3. Yeah. The other issue is that Victoria and Australia more generally is in dire need of criminal justice reform. We need to be keeping violent criminals in jail and in prison for longer, and we need to be creating separate rehabilitation programs for our non-violent criminals so that they can become more productive members of society and give back to society after having wronged them. And I mean, softening the bail laws after, it was a completely failed experiment. You only have to walk around in the city of Melbourne to realise this, would be the complete wrong story to tell the community, particularly when they demanded tougher bail laws.
Well, yeah, the Victorian government didn't do this backflip because it wanted to. It was kicked.
It was forced to.
Yeah, dragged kicking and screaming to that position because this was becoming a huge issue in the electorate. Now let's switch to Sydney. The Lord Mayor of Sydney has put a ban on events being held at Sydney's parks due to, you guessed it, the climate crisis, and fears the council that it will accelerate severe weather events. The council noting that climate change is accelerating severe weather events, and increased rainfall in the lead up to and during outdoor commercial events has resulted in significant damage to large sections of parks. Now, event planners have labelled the move as ludicrous, warning that it is hindering attempts to bring vibrancy back to the city. Even Premier Chris Minns has called for the ban to be overturned in order to bring back that vibrancy to the CBD and surrounds. Prue, it seems crazy that you've got the local council and the mayor making these decisions that are impacting negatively on New South Wales. I mean, it's the power of that city council seems to be disproportionate.
It totally is. You know, every time this Lord Mayor opens her mouth, you should issue a storm warning, because she is so obsessed with climate change. It's her raison d'etre. She's ruined the city with bicycle lanes so that our lane, it's impossible to get through any of the city streets because of it. And now our beautiful parks that are there for people to enjoy. We've got a dying city thanks to COVID and the fact that people don't want to go in there because it is so hard to get around. And she's going to slug the promoters anyway. I don't understand why there's a problem. I mean, let people enjoy the parklands and bring some life to the city. And she's going to go and slug the promoters to do repair work. So I haven't got a clue. She's the most destructive, willful person I've ever come across in political life. She's really, even Chris Minns, the Premier, is wringing his hands. But she's got so much power. She's conned the corporates in the city to vote for her, and she won't be moved, not by any cyclone or thunderstorm. She's going to stay till she's good and ready to damage the whole damn place.
Well, you know what? They keep voting her in, so she could argue I've got a mandate to do precisely what I'm doing. But yeah, it's strange times when you've got the Melbourne Lord Mayor, who seems to be, though he's a leftist, more sensible than the one in Sydney. And Melbourne is supposed to be, the belly of the beast when it comes to leftist politics, but not in this case. Now, before you two go, I do want to talk about international events. Donald Trump has announced a massive $927 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, which will see huge investments made in energy security, defence, technology, critical minerals. And this comes off the back of an interim trade deal that he struck between the US and China. They've agreed to a 90-day truce, and the US, again, seems to be coming out on top in this deal. They've agreed to drop their tariffs from 145% on Chinese goods to 30%. China has dropped their tariffs from 125% to just 10% on US goods. Saxon, this looks like another win for President Trump.
It exactly is. There has never been a bigger mandate for any president than to rewrite the arrangements regarding trade with the United States. And that's exactly what he's done. He campaigned heavily on tariffs. He told the entire world and the American people this is what he was going to do, and they voted him in. And mind you, I mean, the removal of tariffs is a good thing because in the end, a tariff on a good is essentially a tax on consumption. But this is his mandate, and he has done it successfully. He has rewritten the trade negotiations and trade arrangements with other countries. And if they are going to invest in energy security and critical minerals, then, I mean, these are good things, and they should be celebrated.
He campaigned on. This is the thing. These are not surprises. It perhaps were surprises for people in the media, but he campaigned on this relentlessly. We've run out of time. Prue McSween, Saxon, thank you so much for your time tonight.